I believe it's important for you to get out of your comfort zone and to get out of your norm. So when you can change the energy of what you are used to doing and what you're used to being, it's so much easier to shift your mindset that is needed to make some of the bigger leaps in life, like being authentically you. And this could be something like, changing your entire weekend routine, or it could be something as simple as driving home a different way from work. But growth comes with getting uncomfortable. I think you even said that earlier. Growth comes with getting uncomfortable and allowing yourself to be a little bit uncomfortable.
I'm your host, Kim Hines, and welcome to the Emotional Eats podcast. I'm on a mission to show you that what you consume, not just the food, affects your entire life. Midlife is different. Let's dig into the real reasons why you eat when you're not hungry and why you're not feeling well. My guests and I are going to give you doable solutions and help you let go of perfectionism, food rules, and stress to make changes that will last a lifetime. If you're ready to ditch old school diet culture and nourish your entire life, this is the show for you. Welcome to episode 15 of the Emotional Eats podcast, where we talk about all things authenticity. Today, my amazing guest, Tansy Rodgers, takes us on her journey of self-discovery, leading her to become an energetic nutrition and holistic health practitioner. Tansy shares the importance of self-awareness, recognizing past conditioning, and acknowledging the impact of past wounds on our responses and behaviors. One of my favorite parts of the conversation is when we talk about the fact that our relationships serve as mirrors, reflecting how we want to be treated and making change difficult at times. Discover how authenticity can affect your health. And we learned from Tansy about the physical manifestations of emotional blockages, such as stress, tension, low self-esteem, and chronic pain. And Tansy is right there to share some amazing and practical tips to address those challenges. Join us for this thought-provoking conversation as Tansy shares her wisdom, personal experiences, and practical advice on embracing authenticity, living in alignment with our true selves, and reclaiming our power. Tansy has an amazing energy, so sit back and enjoy this episode. Hey, Tansy, thank you for joining me today.
Hi, thank you so much, Kim, for having me on your show.
I just wanted to share with everyone, we've talked a few times before today, and we have such great conversations, and there's so much energy. So listeners, buckle up. This is going to be a good one.
I agree. I always can base my connection to people, and if I feel like we're soul sisters by like the very first talk, and the very first talk that you and I had, it was just explosive in such a good way. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you today.
Me too. It was definitely explosive, and I could have stayed on the phone all day with you. So, when we get into a passion and we get into something that we are using to help other people, a lot of times there's a little bit deeper story behind that. And as an energetic, holistic practitioner, I would love to know, where did you come from? What's a little bit of your background to getting to that point? Because that is a full title. There's a lot involved, and you take care of people in an amazing way. We're talking about energy, and I'd love to know how you got there.
Yeah, so my background is very diverse. I have made so many steps along the way, but the reality comes back to that every single choice that I made, every single step that I took really was focused on this passion of just supporting and helping other women. Supporting and being that voice or that person holding space or that person to just open up possibilities for somebody else. Because as I was growing up, I felt like a lone ship. I felt like as a young girl in the family that I was in, and I don't want to talk bad about my family because my family's great, But the reality was, women kind of had certain expectations and women had a certain place, and that was where you were supposed to operate. And it typically was not on the same level as males. And it was typically in the role of nurturing, taking care of, and being that person that managed the household. And even from a young age, I knew deep, deep, deep in my soul that number one, I was meant for something bigger. I even said that to my mom at one point. I'm meant for something big. And I remember getting the look of like, you're crazy, girlfriend. I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, what does that even mean? I would talk about it to friends because I just thought this was normal. Like everybody thought this way and had these big visions, and I found out quickly that that wasn't true. So I knew from a very young age that I was meant to do something grander, and I didn't know what that meant. And I don't even know if I'm there yet, but I do think that a large part of that was this place of healing and this place of supporting other people and being that woman that I always wished that I had, because I never felt like I truly had it. So as I went through my journey, I was always fascinated by the physical body. Like I loved the mind and the mental health. And then and I loved the physical health, and I loved to exercise and work out and compete. Like I was very competitive in so much that I did. So that was where I gravitated because that's what I knew. So I went to school for psychology and I got my degree in psychology, and I started working in that field for a little bit. And then I was interested in personal training. So I went and got my certification to personal train and teach group fitness classes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm evolving. I'm here. I'm arriving. And then I was like, nope, this isn't quite it. So I just kept shifting and moving. I went back to school for physical therapy. I went to school to get my functional nutritional therapy practitioning certification. So I got into deep nutrition. I was really managing and molding where I thought that I needed to go, where I thought that I was supposed to be that support system for other women. And it really wasn't until about 2015, 2016, where something inside of me was just like, it was niggling. Like it was just like this weird little wiggly discontentment. And I'm like, I don't even know what this is, but because I think I'm on the right path, but something feels off. And that was when I started to really get a lot of intuitive hits or just inner knowings that I was meant to do something that was greater than what I already knew. Okay. I didn't know the words for it. And I'll never forget, Kim. I was out on a run the one morning and I'm running along and I literally get this little thought. I now know that it was divine guidance, but I get this little thought into my brain, and it was mind, body, soul. And I'm like, what the heck does that mean? I don't even point. That was like a little bit pre that concept being more mainstream and talked about. So I'm like, I don't even exactly know what that is, but let me explore. So as I start to explore, I start to understand, oh, there's this thing called energy work. Oh, there's deeper spiritual healing. Oh, there's soul work. Okay. So let's learn about that. And as I did, the intuitive hits, the little inner knowings, those little whispers within me kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And as my vocabulary widened, I realized what I was being called to. I was being called to do energy work specifically and to get back to my roots. Because I also work with crystals and do crystal healing through multiple facets. But that was a childhood love and I had pushed it away. So I was being called to get back into all of these things. But I'll tell you what, Kim, there was no part in me that was ready to do that. There was no part of me that had the courage to really step into that until about 2021 was when I started to open myself up to those possibilities. So when I call myself an energetic nutrition and holistic health practitioner, it's really around this concept of we are these beautiful, amazing, energetic beings that are so deep and so multifaceted that we need good nutrition. We need specific kind of body movements to keep the energy flowing. We need to balance out the energy portals, those chakras, for anybody who is familiar with those terms, those chakras within us. We need to balance out on such a multifaceted level to support the amazing human that we are. And as I started to learn that, I started to step into my authenticity, my inner confidence, my inner knowing, and just being like, here, oh, this was the bigger thing that I was supposed to step into. Got it. Okay. I see. Let's go.
I want to go back to two things you said, because this journey has opened you up to really listening to yourself. And you kept saying intuitive hits. And I love that you are getting intuitive hits, but having the courage to follow through on them sounded like that was the hard part. So what does it mean? We're talking about authentic self, authenticity, really listening to ourselves. What does it even mean, our authentic self? Because there's probably some people listening to this and they're not even thinking, they're thinking, oh yeah, I get these ideas, I get these thoughts, but I don't follow through. But what is authentic self?
Yeah. So authentic self is really simple. It just means that you're true to your own personality, your own values, your own gifts, regardless of what is going on around you, regardless of the pressure, regardless of what anybody else is telling you. You're listening to what you need and you're being honest with yourself. And you're taking that responsibility to move forward with that. And it's not easy. It can be really hard. So simply the definition is quite basic, but the courage and the action to do so can be a little bit more challenging. But it's about really connecting in to what is truth? What's truth? What's truth for you? And not necessarily what is being filtered into your consciousness.
Let's talk about that, because what's true and what comes up in us and our desires and our passions and our dreams, we are up against society. We're up against expectations. And you were even talking about your family. We're up against generational societal expectations. And how is that influencing when women have these feelings, they have these passions, they have these thoughts of what they may want to be, not just do? And how is society changing what the actual outcome is and the courage to do it?
Yeah, well, there's so many ways. And I think that it's important to hit on these because, first off, it's a large piece of your conditioning, your belief systems, right? Like what you learn, it doesn't mean you have to succumb to it, but what you learn can be really sneaky in society, in your family, in your past relationships, current relationships, whatever. The conditioning and the belief systems can filtrate into you, and you may not even necessarily know or realize that you're taking them on, but then also realize that they aren't necessarily authentically what you believe, right? So there is that conditioning in the belief system, but I also think that it's important to highlight and hold space for things like our past wounds and our traumas are going to influence us and how they're going to help us to respond in any situation. I mean, you think about a woman who has been in an abusive relationship, and she has not necessarily gained the understanding or the inner knowing of how to get out of not feeling under the grip of this abusive relationship. Well, as she goes into other relationships, she's going to be more likely to carry over tendencies and ways of acting and being to make sure she doesn't get hurt again, right? This is all of our conditioning from past wounds and traumas, right? But then there's also things like the pack response, or at least that's what I call it, the pack response. So, us humans are social creatures, and most of us have this inner desire to be part of our pack. And it can be really hard to step outside of our pack ideals and expectations in fear that we're going to be isolated and not accepted and kind of thrown to the side. So, I feel from what I've experienced and from what I have seen in the clients that I have worked with is that when we're in relationships, family situations, cultures, a lot of times it can be really challenging to shift because it gets very apparent very quickly, Kim, that people don't want us to change. And they really they want us to change, but they don't really want us to change, because
it takes them out of their comfort zone. Exactly.
Yeah.
It takes them out of their comfort zone. And I wonder if when other people don't want us to change, it's because it shines a light and it's a mirror of what they may want to be looking at also.
Yes, because our mirrors are our number one. Our relationships are our number one mirrors. And when we start to shift and change, we're now mirroring back to somebody that we have a mutual relationship with, whatever that relationship is. We're mirroring something back to them. And that can be really uncomfortable and go against the status quo.
That can be very uncomfortable. And it makes it uncomfortable for the woman who's trying to change. And I'm going back when you're talking about past traumas. This is powerful because we know that when we do the work and we dig deeper, we know that our responses are very often the same year after year after year after year. What are your thoughts on when we're trying to be ourselves, when we're trying to really listen to ourselves, but we have this background of maybe people pleasing or we're not good with boundaries? How do you feel about those specific instances?
Yeah, I think in those specific situations, and I'm speaking from a personal standpoint because I'm not a therapist. Not a therapist, but I've had a lot of therapy. I've had a lot of therapy in my own life, but I've also worked with a lot of coaches, and I feel like I've always had the support around me. I feel like in those situations, it can be really challenging to make that first leap. And I think it's extremely valuable to have somebody on your side that is an outside opinion. So that could be a therapist, it could be a coach, but it could also be just an outside friend that is more objective and can hold space for you. Because when you're in those past traumas and when you're in the mindset of reliving some of those past traumas, and again, you may not even know you're doing this. This could all be completely subconscious. But when you're in that mode of reliving traumas and wounds and some of this conditioning that you have been exposed to, it can feel debilitating when you think, oh, there's another way. I don't even know what that could look like. So that's why, especially depending, and everybody's different. So I don't want to stereotype here, but as an overall, I just feel that those are the times and the situations that I think we need the most outside support to help us take those first steps. It's kind of like a crutch. When you get hurt, you go to the doctor. If you have surgery or you break your leg, you go to the doctor. What do? You're probably going to get some kind of walking assistance. That's the same thing when it comes to this and your mental and emotional health.
Absolutely. And I think having that outside help just helps us even further work on the inside so that we can really know ourselves and what our needs are. So, speaking of that, knowing what our needs are, not being able to be authentic or trust ourselves with our needs, what are some of the negative impacts that it's having on women to not really listen to themselves?
Yeah. Before I answer that, I want to touch on something you just said, because you brought up a really good point. Now, as I say about getting the assistance, but even maybe before that, but in conjunction with that, you have to know yourself. You have to know your priorities and your belief systems, and being able to stand up for that. Having some outside support can help you if that feels really hard for you to rummage up, but you need to know yourself. And, it's funny, when I was a child, my mom my mom would say to me, "You are so sensitive and you cry over everything. How are you ever going to manage in this world?" And that is still stuck in my brain, because what I didn't realize at that time was that I was empathic. I was highly sensitive, and I was picking up on everything that was going on around me. So even in the times that I was crying and didn't know why, or the times that I was angry and screaming and thinking that there must be something wrong with me, a lot of that wasn't mine. And I noticed that trend as I went through my life. I'm into auras as well. And I love learning about aura colors and learning about, how that can affect you. And I've learned that I'm a turquoise aura. I pick up on other people's energies extremely easily. And I'm also very empathic because of that. So you need to know who you are, and then surround yourself with supportive people that are going to help to nourish that in whatever capacity. So I just wanted to touch on that, because I feel like that's a really important
I'm
part.
really glad you did, though, because Tansy, that is how I feel. And I would be embarrassed that I would cry at even commercials, or I would feel so deeply for somebody else's situation and others around me. There was nothing wrong with them. They just had a different personality, a different being. Would say, "Oh, they'll be fine." And I would be ruminating over the thoughts of somebody going through something. So when you mention that, I think that's great, until until you really understand yourself, it feels like a flaw. And if someone else in your world says that and labels you, it takes years to work through that, to make sure that you're not believing. And you said this in the very beginning, the truth is what we're trying to get to, the truth, because that's a label that's kind of a lie just because someone doesn't understand it.
Yeah. 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 So kind of then, wrapping that around and going to what you had asked prior, how it affects your health. Yeah, how it affects your health and how it affects you mentally, physically, emotionally. The reality is that it's a trickle down effect. So we experience this, we take it on as truth, we pull it in, we start to pull away from our authentic self, we start to pull away from who we truly are. And our bodies are so smart, so knowing, because even when consciously we may not realize that we're pulling away from our authenticity, deep down, our inner knowing, our subconscious, our higher self knows. And things start to pop up, like mentally. Maybe you're getting more anxiety. Maybe you're getting more depression, frustration. For me, when it comes to being authentic, frustration is my very first emotion that comes up. I feel frustrated. Nothing is flowing. I don't understand why. And I'm getting really annoyed. Right. So these are the emotions that start to pop up when you pull away, but also things like low self esteem and low self confidence, low self worth, feeling like you are trying really hard to keep up with appearances, and feeling like maybe you're caged like a caged tiger, like you can't seem to get out, right? The low self-respect, the low self-regard, all of these start to pop up. But the scary part about this, honestly, in my opinion, and maybe this is because I'm so tied into the physical body and how our health evolves. The scary thing to me is that when we start to be in this state chronically, and we start to day after day live in this inauthentic self, we begin to trap these emotions within us. We begin to stop the energy flow, and things start to build up physically for us. So you may start with just some stress or some tension, like you start to get like these tight muscles in your shoulders, or maybe your back starts hurting, but it progresses. So things like high blood pressure, headaches, migraines, back issues in general, jaw pain because you're grinding your teeth so much. Maybe you're getting sick more often and your immune system is starting to have some effects. Going to the chakra concept, this energy flow, you may notice that you're having throat and communication issues. Like you can't speak up. So it might feel like, man, I just have something stuck in my throat, right? Maybe you have some heart problems, kind of going back to that chakra concept. We're not expressing our hearts and our true needs and desires. So that can show up as heart problems. You might have systemic inflammation and your body is just experiencing more chronic pain, maybe some fibromyalgia. The list goes on and on and on. And that's why, at least in the work that I do, I find it so valuable to really take a step back and look at, well, what's going on for you physically? Is it just something you're eating? Is it just something that you're not doing physically? Or are these emotions? Are these deeper levels that we need to address? Is this because you're not being truly who you're meant to be?
So those trapped emotions, all of those things that come out, and I love the list you just gave because there are things that people don't even realize are attached to that. They just think they hurt themselves working out, or their skin's breaking out because of something they ate or something in the environment. Their gut is a little messed up. Maybe they have a little food poisoning. And I love how you go through all the layers of it to find out if it's the emotions. So what are some techniques that you may use to help people release some of this emotional, it's like entrapment inside their body? And obviously it's a process, but how do you even get started with someone to help them release that?
I love this question. So there's three things that immediately pop into my mind. Number one, energy work of some sorts. So you could do Reiki or sound healing. You could do massage and acupuncture, right? Doing something that is going to trigger and release the emotions and the energy that are trapped are really important. Because, like I said, some of it may not be yours. Some of it, most likely a lot of it, is stuff that you picked up in your environment. But it's really hard to get to your authentic, true core of yourself when you have energy blockages and things that are out of alignment. It's really hard. So getting some kind of energy work is going to be very helpful. So that's the first thing. Number two, journaling. Journaling, you have got to figure out what's lying below the surface. So journaling on things like questions like how would you benefit from living more of an authentic life? What are 3 to 5 things that you love about yourself? What are 3 to 5 things that you don't like about yourself right now? You know, Uh, what do you need to change to live a more authentic life? Asking yourself some of these deeper questions are really challenging at times, but important, because if we don't uncover, then we're never truly going to understand what needs to go because it's blocking us, right? So that's my second one. My third one that popped into my head immediately was simply moving your body purposefully and with reason. This is why I love yoga. It's why I love straight up mobility work, like literally just moving your body in different ways that are going to increase your flexibility and mobility, focusing on your hips, doing different hip stretches, focusing on your shoulders and your chest muscles and opening them up to get more flexibility. Because I find trapped emotions can happen anywhere in the body. But what I find to be the most common places is in tight hips, tight chest and neck muscles, and then also tight backs. So those three areas seem to really cause the most challenge for a lot of clients that I see coming into me.
You're helping to really clear that out. I love the physical part of that too, because as we're getting older, it's also such a huge part of our longevity. And we don't want to carry not only the physical part of it, because the tighter and the more constrained that we feel as we get older, we really increase our chances of getting injured. And when we work all the way back and then that release, the journaling is amazing too. I'm glad you mentioned that. Some people really struggle to journal. So what I often have people do is just literally write out your day and just see what happens to come out. Maybe something will come out. If you're not sure, just literally write facts down, write what you're thankful for. And you obviously have these beautiful prompts, what they love about their body, even what they don't. It really, really are like themselves inside. So thank you for sharing those. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
What I'm curious about too with all of that, and I come back, it's for everyone, but I come back to women. And, there are women who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, are making more empowered decisions. And sadly, people may be getting divorced, people are going back to work, or on happier moments, they're becoming empty nesters. They may be wanting to start a business or starting a career that they've never started before. When women are really listening in, being themselves authentically, how can that help them make better decisions in their life, one way or the other?
Yeah, great question. Because it's one thing to say how important it is. It's another thing to see it actually happening in our lives and how it can change our lives. So it's important to remember what is most important to us and what's most important to our lives. That is so important to keep in mind, because when we can step back and look at the grand picture and really see what is actually important to us. What is important for our families? What's important in our lives? What's going to bring me more happiness? That can help us to expand and help us to be advocates for ourselves, right? It can help us to open up and to step into these bigger changes or these bigger life shifts, this place of more authenticity. I think another thing to, and I said this earlier, but I think another thing to keep in mind too, especially as we are starting to advocate for ourselves so we can move forward, is to remember that concept that our relationships are our greatest mirror. And when we can use them to reflect back how we want to be treated, we can use them to reflect back how we want to be treated in our relationships and in our life, right? So if these relationships that we're in, if these changes and shifts that we are making are going to go hand in hand, they're going to affect one another, we have to remember, well, what can we learn from these relationships? What can we learn so that we can use this to help fuel us as we move into being more authentic and really advocating for who we are? I hope that answered what you were trying to say.
Yes, but I love what you're saying is what we learn, because nothing has to be necessarily good or bad. It's an experience. And what we learn from it, that curiosity, the observation, and learning to use that moving forward is really important. And then I want to touch upon also what you just said about how we want to be treated. And we, I'm going to say this in a way that it's not about necessarily being treated poorly. I'll put that out there as a disclaimer, just in general in the world, not just in our close relationships. It's really important, I think, when we are ourselves, it's a natural process. It's a natural process what we get reciprocated, because how we react when we are ourselves is different than we would have reacted before we knew that. We wouldn't take it the same way. We wouldn't feel it the same way. We wouldn't react the same way. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And I think that this is really important to note something that you're just kind of touching on, that as we shift and transition into being more authentically us, things are going to change. Our relationships are going to change. Our realities are going to change. Our jobs and what we're okay with is going to change. And with that being said, sometimes being inauthentic can actually serve you in your relationships. Sometimes it can be hard to let go of that, because if you are in, again, it doesn't have to be a relationship. It can be the culture or the society that you're in or the job that you have. But sometimes wearing a different hat can actually serve you. And if you just rip that right off, it can feel extremely traumatizing. And it can feel like you might not be ready for that quite yet. So I think that it's important to recognize that everything comes naturally as it's supposed to. It's supposed to evolve naturally as it's supposed to. Everything has a season, and being okay with, all right, and of course, knowing yourself and knowing, how you respond, but okay, this may serve me right now being inauthentic. Okay, I see that. I get it. But am I ready to jump all in? Or is it time to just start to pull the Band-Aid off? And just recognize that. And wherever you're at, there's no right, there's no wrong. It's where you're at. But I don't. One of the things that I want to shy away from talking about this, and for the listeners to not get stuck in, is I don't want to bring any shame to the conversation of authenticity versus not feeling so authentic. I want to empower you to step towards that, but also remind you that it is okay if you don't feel that you're totally there or you're not quite ready, because sometimes in certain situations, it's going to be a little bit more of a challenge to be truly who you are. And that doesn't mean that that's, a good thing or not. That could be a really unhealthy relationship, but you need to do what you need to do for you.
I love that, because there is a transitional process. And in many ways, we're all in that transitional work in progress phase of becoming more and more. Everyone's in a different chapter of the book. And I love how you said sometimes being inauthentic will serve you at that time. And I think about the phrase having peace over being right. Sometimes in situations, we need that peace because the consequences could be a little more upending at that time. There's time down the road when we learn how to express ourselves, being more authentic. And sometimes that's part of the process too, is just learning how to express ourselves still in a loving, kind way. Because sometimes when we learn to be ourselves, I have some clients that, like, well, I just said what I was thinking. And they realize that there may be a better way to present their feelings and who they truly are.
Yeah.
What I do have a question for you, though, and this is going to the outside of our bodies. I know we're talking about being authentically ourselves inside, but with society, with social media, with the things that we see, the things that we are influenced by, what are your thoughts on learning to be ourselves and I work with women who are usually in midlife, some a little younger, and looking at how we feel about aging, what we're doing with our hair, following trends, wearing makeup. There's so many examples, all the way down to the body that perhaps they're seeing that they feel they should be. I'd just love to know what your thoughts are around authentically being yourself physically also.
Yeah. So authentically being physically who you are, it starts on the inside. And it starts with where you're at in your self-love, your self-acceptance, and beyond, right? When somebody is not happy with the weight that they're at, and I'm not talking about you looking in the mirror and saying, you know what, I put on 5 pounds. I'm not too happy with that. So I'm gonna just be more conscious of what I'm eating and how I'm moving my body. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people who really become immersed in the diet culture or immersed in over exercising or just getting into that mindset of needing to change physically who they are to be okay. That's what I'm talking about. And those situations specifically, there's something deeper. And I think that exploring what that is, because it's never surface level, exploring what that is needs to be opened up. And so when you're in a situation like that, again, you could go back to the journaling, but you could do something as simple as sitting and meditating and just allowing yourself to calm your mind and get in touch with your body. It could be something as simple as gratitude work and standing and looking in the mirror with no judgment and just saying, what do I love about who I am today? And how am I okay? Right? So when it comes to the physical side, outside of just wanting to be a healthier person and just wanting to be physically well in this vessel that we're given, I think that it's important to remember that you really need to dive below the surface and address some of those conditionings and the belief systems and some of the wounds or the traumas that may have picked up over the years to be able to truly let that all go. I'll talk about, I grew up, again, I gave you a little bit of my background, but I grew up really being very not confident in my body and feeling always like I was not thin enough. I wasn't sexy enough. I wasn't pretty enough. Like whatever physical emotion that I would attach to my body. And it really took a lot of inner work for me to be able to stand in front of the mirror and say, oh my gosh, look at my hips. My hips may be a little bit bigger than what they were in my 20s, but man, do I look good. And again, that may not have happened without that little bit of extra inner work that I needed to do. And to also give myself permission to be just who I am and to be okay with that.
That is it right there. Give yourself permission to be who you are. I
Yeah.
love that. And thank you for sharing, because you're being very open and honest about that. Gives us permission to really talk about how we all have gone through those insecurities, and the inner work is so important. So, with that, I love how you also help people nurse their entire lives. It's not just physical, it's inner work too. If someone's just getting started in this process, or whatever way that you think that they should get going, what are 3 simple tips for someone to get started on nourishing their entire life?
Yeah. So I'm going to bring back some of the things that we talked about a little bit in this podcast, but also touch on some that maybe I danced around. So, first off, get to know who you really are and become your greatest observer. Journal, observe how you react around the main people in your life. Notice how your body starts to respond to situations, people, words, whatever, right? Notice how you are being in this world and get curious and bring in a lot of wonder. It is something as simple as just you might be in a conversation with your boss and just standing there, taking a step back out of the conversation and just noticing, how does my body feel? What am I thinking? Do I feel stressed or do I feel happy? Right? But notice and then start to shift how you want to respond, how you want to note, or what you want to notice when your body is giving you these warning signals. When you start to see these warning signals coming in, that's when you can start to let go and shift how you are responding or shift how you are being, right? A lot of times our body reacts in certain ways because of traumas and wounds and past experiences, and we don't even necessarily know it. So making sure that you are aware of first of how your body is and what it's doing. Like for me, when I get stressed, my jaw gets super tight and my shoulders are like up to my ears because I just get so tense. When I'm in a situation and I can feel that happening, that is a cue to me that I am taking on too much stress. I need to either be very purposeful in how I'm letting stress go in the moment, or I need to shift what is happening so that I can release that stress as quickly as I can, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing, I believe it's important for you to get out of your comfort zone and to get out of your norm. So when you can change the energy of what you are used to doing and what you're used to being, it's so much easier to shift your mindset that is needed to make some of the bigger leaps in life, like being authentically you. And this could be something like, changing your entire weekend routine, or it could be something as simple as driving home a different way from work. But growth comes with getting uncomfortable. I think you even said that earlier. Growth comes with getting uncomfortable and allowing yourself to be a little bit uncomfortable. And we all have different levels of being comfortable or not. So you don't have to do anything grandiose. It can be so small and simple, but that's where the growth happens. And then finally, I would also say I'm a big proponent of reevaluating life, reevaluating what's working, reevaluating what's not working, and revisiting. We love to hoard in this life. Relationships, physical possessions, family obligations, responsibilities. We love to hoard and bring this stuff in. But the more that we hoard and the more that we surround ourselves with these things, the more it actually energetically just clogs up the flow of our greatness. And we can't be quite as authentically us. We start to become more slaves to our system, right? Too much chaos in our physical world can be a direct reflection of our inner chaos. So think of things like, do you have a ton of memberships that you are signed up with? Do you have old gifts and presents that were never really you, but you kept a hold of them because you felt bad? Or maybe multiple things in your house that are just constantly surrounding you that you're not even sure why you still have them because they're not you. And that kind of goes into the last point of this is we outgrow ourselves. We outgrow ourselves. We outgrow things in our life. That includes relationships and clothing and hobby and our styles. but we continue to gather them and hold on to them tightly because it can be scary to let it go. And the more we hold on, the less authentic we are being for that season of our life. We need to let go of what no longer is serving us. We need to purge it out because ultimately, Kim, what that does is it frees up our energy so we can attract more aligned things into our life and encourage us to be more authentically us. So let go of the chaos and reevaluate what's still working.
Preach it, Tansy. That was amazing. Those 3 tips. This was a great episode, but those 3 tips just sealed it. That was amazing. So you are a gift, and I want people to be able to find you. Where can everyone find you? And do you have anything going on that you can offer?
Yeah. So right now, the best places to find me are at tansyrogers.com. That is the hub of all of my stuff. Well, the majority of my stuff. So I would say go there first. If you are on the Instagram, you can check me out at Tansy Rodgers Wellness, but I hang out the most over at BEU Crystals. That is my crystal jewelry line, but I also talk a lot about energy work over there as well. So you can check me out at either one, depending on, what your preference is. I also have a podcast called the Energy Fix Podcast, where we talk all things health, wellness, and energy healing. So if that's something that's interesting to you, please go and check that out and subscribe. And outside of that, what I'm offering right now, the biggest things that I have been focusing on is my BU Therapeutic Crystal Jewelry for people who are looking to have a tangible piece to help them bridge the gap. Anything from physical to mental, emotional, spiritual, pretty much runs the gamut. So that's something you could check out. That and my crystal Reiki work. I do virtual sessions as well. If you're in my area, of course, one-on-one, but I do virtual sessions. So if you like crystals and you want some energy healing, hit me up because we can talk about some crystal Reiki work. And then the final thing that I've been excited about and have been really expanding is my mind, body, soul detox mentorship. And that's just a one-on-one program. It is specifically targeting you to help you energetically, nutritionally, and physically shift where you are at now and where you want to go. And honestly, help you avoid burnout so that you can learn to love life again. That is the main focus because we take such a trifecta approach to your ultimate transformation.
Thank you so much, Tansy, for being here. I appreciate you. And all of this will be in the show notes also. So listeners, remember to nourish your entire life and give yourself grace today. I really appreciate you being here. If you resonated with this podcast, it would mean a lot to me if you'd be willing to follow or subscribe to the Emotional Eats podcast. Then you'll never miss an episode. Just go to the Emotional Eats show page on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts and tap the plus sign in the upper right-hand corner and click on it. While you're there, if you'd be willing to give me a 5-star rating and review, I would be so grateful. If you'd like to take a screenshot and share it on Instagram, just tag me at Kim Hines Health. I would love to hear your thoughts and let me know how I can support you. You can always DM me on Instagram, again, at Kim Hines Health. And just remember to nourish your life and give yourself grace today.